CURES is sponsored by Wheeler Health's Better Choice program. More at wheelerhealth.org.
Helping you lead a healthier life. This is CURES.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the CURES Show. This is where we explore cutting-edge wellness from credible sources. And today we're talking about the mental health crisis among our children and really the role that schools should play to help. Dr. Laura Saunders is a child psychologist at the Institute of Living in Hartford. And we're talking about a changing of the tides also in with the current administration and the view that perhaps physical health should come before mental health, according to some new opinions from the administration. Dr. Saunders, thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Kara.
So this is something that Education Secretary Linda McMahon and Health and Human Services Secretary Robert Kennedy Jr. have argued against annual school-based mental health screenings, saying that sometimes those efforts turn the normal ups and downs of childhood into lasting stigma. So help us understand first, before these comments came out, what happens in school now? Because I thought there was a general belief that maybe schools already aren't doing enough for mental health.
Yeah, so obviously something like this is extremely concerning to me as a child and adolescent psychologist. It should be to parents, it should be to educators, school support personnel. I think what's really important to note here is that, children aren't necessarily being regularly screened at schools for mental health issues. It's generally the case that someone is identified as having difficulties, and then at the parent's request, right? Nothing happens in schools without the parent's support, request, permission, and advocacy.
Okay.
You can get a screening. You can, based on what's happening. Now, for the most part, pediatricians will do a regular yearly behavioral health screening or mental health screening, but that's one time a year, right? Teachers see kids 180 days a year. So they are, I think, often really well prepared and, just have the experience base to highlight when there might be difficulties, talk with parents about it, and then talk about different options or resources.
Yeah, I think this touches on a bigger issue of, let's talk about what happens when you identify a child. Perhaps you say they are suffering from anxiety or depression, or I'm noticing difficulties in school, and they get an ADHD diagnosis. It seems the administration is saying in this quote, physical health should come before mental health, that by over-diagnosing or labeling kids, that somehow we're harming them. From your side of the couch, what happens when you identify a kid, and does that harm them in any way by giving them a diagnosis?
So let's talk realistically about how this pattern would unfold in school. Generally, what would happen is that a child struggling in school would, in fact, affect their academic performance, right? Mm. You see that the child's falling asleep during the day in school, or their grades are suffering, or they're getting into some behavioral issues, right? Something is evident in their performance, in their behaviors, in their attitudes, in their, this is what you observe. So it's not like we're just plucking kids out and saying we think you have a mental health problem. Mm. In fact, I think one of the most important lessons we learned during COVID and during the pandemic is that there is no physical health without mental health, and vice versa. We can't have one without the other. You can't be mentally healthy without your physical health, and you can't have good physical health without your mental health. We need both of them to work together. It starts in childhood. So the more openly we talk about things, the less it creates stigma, right? Stigma is the expectation of rejection based on an aspect of identity. So if someone has anxiety or depression or ADHD or autism spectrum, we stigmatize them because we expect less of them, or we have negative connotations towards them. But the more we educate people and say, ADHD is just a kind of neurodivergence. Autism spectrum is a spectrum disorder, right? There's people that are really on the high end of autism that may look very typically functioning. Someone with anxiety might need additional support, the same with depression. So the more we identify these things and talk about them openly, in fact, it reduces stigma.
Okay. And the science has shown that mental health is really crucial to overall well-being and development, which would be good grades in school and functioning well with your teachers. If your mental health is suffering, you're not going to probably do as well in the other departments.
Absolutely. Right. If you're depressed or overly anxious, or there's something significant going on at home and that's really negatively affecting you, there's high family conflict, or your parents are going through a divorce, or one parent is struggling with a serious physical problem or serious mental health problem, right? So when those things happen, it affects the whole family system. So an individual that's really struggling with significant mental health issues is not going to be able to perform academically or socially. And if we think about the three areas of a child's life, it's their social life and their friends, school, and home, right? So if something's happening at home, it affects them in the other two areas. If there is, an underlying mental health issue, depression, anxiety, a mood disorder, a learning issue, right? Significant learning issue, it's going to affect them in all three realms of their life.
And how does the social emotional development that might be connected to mental health, if you're struggling in that department, how might it hurt you if you're not getting any help?
So if someone has difficulties or deficits in their social emotional development, in their ability to regulate their emotions, in their ability to make connections and friendships, right? I'm the one who always says, I think school is equally as valuable to learn social skills and life skills as it is to learn academic skills, right? Because you can do whatever it is that you want to do in your life, you still need to be able to get along with people. You need to be able to talk to people and relate to people. So without the ability to build healthy relationships, it really leaves someone foundationally lacking in their development.
Yeah. And how does that relate to academic performance? It seems that if we're talking about let's prioritize physical health over mental health, what you're saying is those two are really connected. You can't really just focus on one and not the other. And how does that parlay into academic performance if, for devil's advocate, you say, hey, school is just for learning?
Right. And so I would disagree with that. I mean, but because I guess I would reframe it. There's all different types of learning. In the same way that schools for the last, 50, 60 years have done a great job in emphasizing physical health, right? There's vision screenings. There's hearing screenings. There's, scoliosis screenings. There's all sorts of things that happen in a school system to identify problems early. It's not that different if you see a young person really struggling. I had someone come to me, a client come to me not that long ago and talk about, feeling kind of mentally cloudy and having difficulty sleeping and really difficulty with their attention. And they realized those things were different because this was a very high achieving student. They started to do poorly on some tests on their academic work. And that was causing them more distress because a big part of their identity was that they are a top level student. So you realize how the two really impact one another. So if you are feeling mentally cloudy, or you're having trouble sleeping and your attention is really struggling, you can't concentrate, and now it's affecting your academic work, how can we address that so that it's not affecting someone so negatively? So, I mean, and these are small interventions. We start with small interventions early on because we want kids to attend school, right? Absenteeism is a huge problem in a lot of districts. We want kids to feel like school is a safe and affirming place for them. We want parents to be involved in schools. All the research shows that the more parents are involved in schools, the more high achieving the students are. So we want to work together and in partnership. This is not about school systems sort of going rogue without bringing parents along and without parental consent.
Right. I mean, I know here in Connecticut, some people have argued that there needs to be more funding and more abilities for mental health because we do have a lot of struggles, especially since the pandemic. Suicide rates have gone up. Am I correct?
Yes, they have.
Okay. So
Yeah,
now I'm just looking at what RFK has said because so that everyone can, understand this from all sides, that RFK Jr. is arguing that if you focus on physical health, nutrition, and exercise, that's a natural way to improve mental well-being. And he criticizes that mental health screenings can medicalize normal childhood behavior. Do you see any truth in that, or what's your take?
So my take on that is that normal, and actually I usually use the word typical because normal comes off as judgmental, right? Because what's the opposite of normal? It's abnormal, right? And abnormals, there's a huge judgment against abnormal. So I use the word typical. And no matter what the developmental milestone is, no matter what the academic milestone is, there's a range of typical. And kids fall anywhere in that range. What we're concerned about is kids that are sliding outside the range of typical. And that's why I love to get, to talk with teachers, because teachers, especially seasoned teachers that have years and years of experience, can really give you great information and feedback about what the range is of typical. They see what the range is. So if you think your child is motorically restless and really having trouble with paying attention and very fidgety and very impulsive, right? And that child's in kindergarten, first or second or third grade, and you go to the teacher and you say, listen, I'm worried about this in my child. And the teacher says, I actually think your child falls within the range of typical in this classroom. Well, that can be a real relief. So we are not talking about people in a very narrow range. We're talking about development happening within a range. Okay. So there are ups and downs. We expect that. We understand that. We are concerned about the kids that fall outside the range of typical, and now they're underperforming in some way. That's when we want to really prevent that from going on for a long period of time. And that's really the importance of early intervention.
I mean, I'm looking at a letter that was sent against this new idea from the American Psychological Association. It says mental health support doesn't treat kids as though something is wrong with them. It helps them understand their feelings, build confidence, and learn how to handle tough situations. So I know we've talked on this show a lot about resilience, and that even when you do have a learning difference, it's not an excuse, but it could be an explanation. How do you see screening mental health kids as a way to help them thrive, not make them feel less than?
So when a child is struggling with something, and whether or not they're able to like say that out loud, right? Because very often what happens is it shows up in their behavior, right? Now all of a sudden they're avoiding school, or they used to want to do extracurricular activities and now they really don't want to do those things anymore, right? So when things show up in their behavior, and you can identify what's going on, and when necessary, we don't need to necessarily put a label or a diagnosis on things, right? Someone can have sort of strengths and weaknesses without it being like an actual label. But the more we can identify things, it actually helps young people feel like, oh, that's why I have difficulty paying attention in class. That's why I have organizational issues. That's why I'm so fidgety and so restless, is because I have ADHD. So it helps them understand and then work on those issues and to compensate and find ways to be successful. So we're not looking to label people in a pejorative way. And honestly, we don't even necessarily always need to label people, but identifying an issue when there is absolutely behavioral observations or things that are falling out. They're falling out of that typical developmental range, putting a label on it, getting some help and support actually makes young kids feel better about themselves.
Yeah. And we've talked about this, that when a child has ADHD, and I've gone through this with my own son, where it was a teacher who raised the awareness and said, I think maybe you want some screening. for a parent, there's information in that. We had a producer here who wasn't sure why her child was not functioning in kindergarten very well, and they suggested some screenings, and they ended up finding out that this child was on the autism spectrum. So as parents, we often don't know what's going on. So what you're saying is the schools being a first line of defense can be really important for the future of the child, including their academic performance.
Absolutely, because in those circumstances, right, you have your own child, and sometimes you have your own childhood to reflect on, but you don't have kind of the developmental range or the developmental perspective that teachers have or that pediatricians have, and so you can rely on their expertise to help you say, I'm concerned about your child. Are you concerned also? And then work together as a team to really, come up with a plan to address any deficits or help them with accommodations if that's necessary. It's not always necessary, but the more we can support our young people and again, the earlier the better, but the better we support them, the better they feel about themselves. And when you feel good about yourself, you're more likely to put effort into something. You're more likely to be successful. It's okay to have failures, right? We talk about that all the time. Failure experiences are extremely valuable experiences, but chronic failure experiences lead to poor academic performance and poor emotional outcomes.
So let me just play devil's advocate. If you don't diagnose, let's say it's ADHD, and typical, you have a boy who won't sit and they're running around, and it seems like that Secretary Kennedy is saying, well, if they get enough physical activity, if they get good nutrition, that might be enough. And certainly you would say that all those things are really important. I know we always talk about low-hanging fruit, sleep, nutrition, exercise. You need that. So you do need that for good mental health, but then is it enough?
So I mean, I want the basics for all families, but we like to deal in reality here, right? And the reality is there are some, families and cities and areas that are more kind of lower socioeconomic, and they don't always have food on the table, and they don't always have safe neighborhoods for kids to run around and play in. But the reality is that this is not 100 years ago when you only went up to like fifth or sixth grade, and then people went off to the farms or the factories to work, right? We want a modern industrialized society that produces people to their highest capability. So we have school, which is designed to be there for 6 hours a day. And yes, we can build in breaks and we can build in, physical activity. But, even in high school, phys ed is only, a couple of semesters or a couple of quarters for the year. You don't necessarily have phys ed every day to burn off your energy. I mean, that would take a major revamping of the school systems. So so these things important. Do we need to support extracurricular activities and help people find their interests? But I like to deal in reality, and we have an academic system that's really trying to create a lot of high achievers because that's how we function better and achieve more as a society.
Yeah. So in this opinion of physical health should come before mental health, according to Linda McMahon, who comes here from Connecticut, Education Secretary and Health and Human Services Secretary, you see them as equal.
I see them absolutely as equal, that you can't have one without the other. And I don't even want to prioritize one over the other. You can't have physical health without mental health. You can't have mental health without physical health. If you feel crappy about yourself, you're not going to eat as well, or you're not going to sleep as well. So, I mean, it comes down to the basics. And I think the more we provide information and education to families and to school districts, the more we try to support not just physical health, but mental health, in the same way that schools need to have creative arts programs, right? You need to have multiple ways to learn and to express yourself. It's not just about reading and writing and arithmetic all day long. We need to really support all of the strengths of our young people.
Yeah. We're going to take a moment and hear from one of our sponsors and then come back and see. what we can do really as parents, because all of this, whatever the government is going to do, and I'm not aware of any blanket policy changes yet, but as a parent, that's where you have your control and what you can do to make sure that you're advocating and getting your child what they need. But let's listen to our sponsor for a sec.
Struggling with gambling? Wheeler Health's Better Choice program offers personalized support and treatment to help you regain control. Visit WheelerHealth.org to learn more and take the first step towards recovery today.
And we're back with Dr. Laura Saunders, who's a child psychologist at the Institute of Living. And safe to say you're a little concerned about the administration saying that physical health is more important than mental health.
Absolutely. And, I see them as really being equally weighted. Really, we want to identify issues when they're small problems, not big problems. We want to prevent chronic conditions. We want to, because small problems that don't get addressed become big problems. Really poor self-worth and poor academic performance and, a lot of negativity, leads people down roads towards not caring about school, and then absenteeism, and then substance use, and then criminality, right? So we have to really address things in a simple and matter-of-fact way. We're aiming to reduce stigma, and the way that you reduce stigma is by talking about things openly, not hiding them, and not pretending that mental health issues don't exist.
Yes, and one of your points of physical health does also impact mental health. And I think this is where you agree with Secretary Kennedy. He's saying if your physical health improves, your mental health naturally improves. So that's part of it. But you're saying also when you have mental health issues, it can impact your physical health. Like if you have anxiety, you might not sleep well, or eating disorders can affect all types of issues. Chronic disorders could affect your physical health as well. So they might actually originate in the mental sphere and then start affecting the physical sphere. Yeah.
And also, identifying, for individuals, while we're in the process of reducing stigma, as parents identify their own issues, their own substance use issues, or depression or anxiety or mood disorders or autism spectrum, because that affects the entire family system. And so the more we can address things in an open and honest and supportive way, it just boosts everyone up.
Yeah. Now, when he says the Secretary Kennedy saying, he doesn't really support annual mental health screenings because he thinks it just overdiagnoses the ups and downs of childhood. I haven't experienced that here in Connecticut where my kids have gotten a mental health screening just as like part of, oh, here's your annual thing, we're doing this, other than at the pediatrician's office. Are you fearful? Is that happening in schools where people just get an annual mental wellness check, or is it more that they're offered the screenings that could help them identify a mental health issue if there's a problem? And if so, would that go away in some way? Is that your fear?
So I'm not working directly in school systems at this point. And so I don't know of any school systems in Connecticut that are doing regular mental health screenings. I think what happens is a problem's identified. And obviously the most obvious one is either school performance is affected or behavioral problems manifest themselves during the school day. And then we look to address or identify some of the things that might be causing that, right? So, I honestly, I'd be all for regular mental health screenings in the same way that we have, as we said, scoliosis and hearing and vision and all those kind of checks. We want to support all of the needs of our young people because we're sending the message that anything that might be difficult for you is something that we can support you with, and we want to identify problems early on and not let them get to be bigger. But I don't know of any districts that are doing, regular mental health screenings.
So I do remember as a kid bending over to show your spine, especially if you're a female. They want to make sure if you have scoliosis, they identify it because then you get a brace. And you're saying that it makes sense to do some of these school level screenings where perhaps they do a Connors report or a Vanderbilt scale or something. These are usually paper surveys with a teacher and a parent, because if there is an issue, then there can be interventions, much like the brace for scoliosis, that would scaffold the kid in school.
Yes, I mean, again, but for the most part, we want to use our resources to the best of our ability, or to the best of a district's ability. So, that's why the pediatrician has, all pediatricians, at least in this state, they do regular screenings for mental health issues, just like they screen for physical health issues. So that's the foundational place where the pediatrician is actually saying mental health and physical health are equally as important. So the more we can and talk about this openly, destigmatize. It would be great to do regular screenings. What we do might be up for debate, but the more we talk about this openly, the better it is for everyone.
So your fear is if the administration says, I'm not into all these mental health screenings because I could think it could stigmatize kids, that the American Psychological Association and you as a psychologist worried that kids might actually not get what they need to, because sometimes that identification usually happens in school, right, for ADHD or things like that. This teacher starts noticing that there might not be an IEP or a 504 or other things that could help the kid.
Right. So it really is about, again, talking about things openly. And there are times where kids need accommodations, but there are times where simply just talking about an issue openly allows the family system or the school system or to address things in a way without even full-blown accommodations. And again, if a child is struggling with reading and they don't understand why they're struggling with reading, and maybe it is that they have actually a learning disability, or just a learning weakness, right? It doesn't even have to be a full-blown disability. Learning ways to compensate for those helps them feel better about themselves, because otherwise then they just avoid reading, right? And reading's a foundational thing no matter what you do in life.
Okay.
So addressing things early is really the best intervention.
Okay. Are you aware yet, has it come through you that, this is a comment that was made by the Education Secretary and a comment made by Health and Human Service Secretary Robert Kennedy. There hasn't anything that I'm aware of, and I don't know if it's coming down your pipeline, that policy is starting to change at the school level yet. There's only 30 seconds left. So
yeah,
sorry.
I don't know of any policies changing, but I would be very, very upset if they were. So.
Yes. All right, Dr. Laura Saunders, thank you for helping us understand the issues and advocate for our kids. We appreciate it on CURES. Have a great day, everyone, and be well. And if you want more help and more mental health issues, you can always listen to the CURES podcast and watch on WFSB Plus and the WAX. Have a great day and be well.
CURES, sponsored by Wheeler Health's Better Choice program. More at wheelerhealth.org.